Alright, hey guys, it's Paul. So, today I wanted to actually talk about the upcoming Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban list. Now, this is actually a topic that I've kind of gotten away from talking about in recent years because I'm really not like super invested in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! On the whole, and there are channels that I feel are just like a better source of information and opinions around this. But I figured I would because I've been playing a little bit more Yu-Gi-Oh! Lately, and I also was following like some of the coverage for Nationals and a couple of the recent YCS events, and just trying to play a little bit more of that side of the game at least. So I do have thoughts. I will just say disclaimers. First and foremost, like I said, I'm probably not the best source of like information on this. I haven't like been playing at YCSs and that, so take it with a grain of salt. Also, they're just opinions. Please calm down. Konami's not consulting me about any of this, so if you think that my opinions are wrong, it's okay because they probably won't happen. And yeah, so just I think that's it. I mean, like the typical ban list stuff. All right, where to start with all this? There are a lot of troubles in this game. Let's sort of wrap up the format, like, and summarize a bit. You got Sword Soul, you got Despia, those are really popular. You got your pile decks, you've got some of your offshoot decks, Flunderies comes to mind. There are a couple of just different rogue decks that sort of pop up. I'd actually describe the format itself as like pretty diverse. I mean, the fact that you can still see certain older themes like Drytron or Dragon Link still like manage to pop up and kind of make a dent is pretty cool. And I think most people tend to like diverse formats. I actually don't think that there are overly powerful decks so much as there are overly powerful concepts or like sort of plays in the format right now. So what I mean by that, I think the obvious one that comes to mind for a lot of people would probably be Artifact Scythe and the Scythe locks. Those are really big ones. We now that Vert Anaconda got banned in the last ban list, the Scythe locks were like seemingly stopped because at least you can do them with the Story of Phoenix Enforcer, but there's still about a billion other ways to do it. There's the, Hulk Dagda combo thing with TG Wonder Magician that can also get you a Barone in the process, a play that I think is just absolutely insane. So Artifact Scythe is, that's probably like the number one card in the hot seat right now, or at least just over the course of the format. A lot of people don't like this thing. I totally get why. I'm not a big fan of turn skipping cards like Scythe because you just have to use your extra deck these days for the majority of things that you're going to be playing. So, that's something that people are complaining about. We'll address that. A lot of people complain just in general about maybe Halki Fibrax. Obviously, it's related to the Scythe, like Dagda stuff. But on its own, it's also just always been a bit of a point of contention. These link monsters that summon stuff for free or send stuff for free, like straight from the deck, are almost never, they're almost never really good news. It's kind of a recipe for disaster. Traditionally, those have been some of the cards that have been the most broken and eventually found themselves banned. So, so you've got Hulk, and it's there, it exists. There's some problems with that, or at least, if you ask people. Another sort of thing is the Adventure engine. So this engine released and did exactly what Konami probably knew was going to happen, and a lot of players predicted. It's kind of in everything. People run Adventure in anything that they can possibly fit it in, unless the deck just outright, prevents you from doing it. You will see Adventure Token, Rite of Aramasir, whatever, in lots of decks. This engine gets you a lot of advantage. It's pretty self-sufficient, and it can provide you with a negate as your second summon of the turn, so it's a really great counterplay for things like Nibiru and also just things like hand traps for when your opponent is being forced to deal with your actual dex plays, because this combines so well with existing engines. Another major concept of the format in general is the pile decks. They got a slight nerf, last hit with, what was it, White Rose Dragon? Which is the Rose Dragon that got hit? Rox Rose Dragon? One of the Rose Dragons got hit, and like Vert got hit. And so that was something, but the pile deck still exists. Pile decks being like kind of the engine amalgamation decks. Sometimes they're 40 cards, sometimes they're 60 cards, and they just are like engines galore. They can spam out links, they can spam out, whatever strong extra deck monsters they need. They're really tough to deal with because it's hard to know like what you're supposed to really be hand trapping with your Ash or your Imperm, whatever. And so in many cases, people have just resorted to using cards like Droll and Lockbird. So yeah, there's obviously quite a lot going on. Now, one thing that wasn't like as much talked about, but is being talked about a little bit more now, is the Floodgate thing. So in Nationals, obviously the winning deck was Sword Soul, and it was like main decking Rivalry of Warlords, and also like Anti-Spell Fragment showed up a lot. There Can Be Only One showed up a lot. Mystic Mind showed up a lot at this Nationals, and so there's a lot of sort of discourse right now around like floodgates, their place in the game, should they be here, should they not. Okay, I think that covers everything. Now, what do I think she could hit? Well, first of all, none of my picks are going to be super controversial. This is probably stuff that you've heard before. I'll try to justify it at least and maybe provide some alternative lines of thought. But for the most part, it's stuff that you've probably heard online around. I think that Artifact Scythe should probably just be banned. I don't really care for this card a lot. I'm not a fan of turn skips. I'm not a fan of the existence of Dagda. I mean, Dagda makes sense like as a card, but like many link monsters, I don't know why they have gotten away from like limiting these like archetype links and stuff and extract monsters to their own archetype. Like if the turn you summon Dagda, you can't summon anything but artifacts or whatever, it would have been fine, but or if it like took artifacts to make, but that's not the case. So Dagda can set Scythe and Hulk can pop it and do all the things. You know how it works. I think Scythe should go. I don't like turn skips. Scythe's been in the game for a really long time. It's already been like kind of a contentious point just with Artifact Sanctum, and it still can get played like that. But I think that the fact that you can now literally search this card and like set it to the field and all that stuff and trigger it proactively, like without your opponent really doing anything, nah, don't like this card. I think it should go. It's been around long enough. The alternative could be to like ban Dagda, but I don't think that's really fair. I think that banning Scythe would be fine because then that means that Dagda can still be used in an actual dedicated artifact deck, which I know you're going to say, oh, not that many people play that anyway. Sure, but like there are artifact players, and I would hate for them to lose an otherwise good and balanced and useful link monster. It's just Scythe's a problem and it's got to go. So yeah, okay, next card is Crystron Halqifibrax. I think this card is another one that it's been around too long. Like I said before, cards that summon stuff from the deck, not really great. Too many useful tuners. I don't know why they even unbanned Jet Synchron, to be completely honest. But yeah, Jet Synchron, all the combos with that, all the combos with like Deskbot 001. I'm tired of seeing like a lot of these cards show up, and I think that they can just like, listen, I know the common argument is that Hulk helps rogue decks. Like my rogue deck can use Halqifibrax and get its little tuner and do its little thing, but there are bigger fish to fry. I know that sucks. It's just the way that it is. I think that this card is better off banned. I don't understand what their idea with like even putting it to 1 was. Like I get it, but like not really. I mean, this card just needs to go. There's not a lot more to say about it. I hate it for people who use it like in a maybe more what they consider a more honest way, but I think that this card just needs to go. Okay, the more interesting things come down to the adventure engine, the floodgates, and a couple of other cards. So, adventure engine. I just want to start by saying I really hate that Konami didn't just make Wandering Griffin Rider be a card that like locked you into adventure token cards for the turn. It really sucks. I think that if it had just been designed that way, we wouldn't have had any of these problems. We wouldn't have had to hit these cards like on the ban list at all. In the OCG, I think they put Water Enchantress and Rite of Aramesir to 1 each. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Now I know in Master Duel they released at 2. So, man, I don't exactly know. So I don't have as much of a problem with this engine as some people do. I know that it is definitely oversaturating the game, and I don't like that part. And obviously Griffin's very annoying. I feel bad for people who actually play the adventure token deck like as it's intended. Alec actually has a pure adventure token deck. He plays it, it's fun. And the deck itself is very novel and unique, and the way that it works is really cool. It's just that if they had limited you to summoning like adventure token cards or something for the rest of the turn, then we wouldn't have had these problems, and they wouldn't have had to like, I just hate the idea of like limiting like Rite and like Water Enchantress and stuff and like making that deck so hard to fundamentally play. I know in the next set, Darkwing Blast, they're going to be getting some new cards that sort of mitigate this, so that was clearly like an answer. But I would say this might be a bit of a hot take. Maybe Konami starts by putting these cards to 2, like Water Enchantress and Rite of Aramesir could go to go to 2, see like what that does. I mean, I know that's what they did with Nadir's Servant, and that ended up kind of making the card just not really get played a lot. So maybe that's the solution. Maybe that's the answer. I mean, like it might just come down to it having to go to 1, and if it does, I get that. Yeah, I get that. It's fine. I can live with it. I don't have a personal attachment to the engine, so like, however it gets hit, it's fine. That just seems like that would probably be the realistic solution. But yeah, I'd like to see 2 as a start and see if that like wards people off from playing it, make it a little bit bricky. One interesting thing that Trell mentioned was maybe they could like, you know, put, where's the card? Maybe they could put like Rite of Aramesir to 1 and then not hit like anything else. So now it's like a much brickier engine or like something like that. I mean, I don't know. There's lots of ways to hit it. You guys can let me know what you think. That's just what I think. Okay. Next thing is the floodgate cards. So there's a lot of these. Obviously, you could say Scythe is one of them. So I definitely want that banned. I used to kind of be something of a floodgate apologist. Like I used to kind of be like, oh, maybe they're fine to exist. But I know that they are really, really not popular right now. And I'm starting to come around to just, these cards aren't great. Cards that just don't let your opponent play, cards that like freeze turns, all that stuff. It's rude. I think it'd be nice if more of these floodgates like went to 1. I'm hesitant to just ban them outright, but I think the biggest issue that's come up with floodgates nowadays isn't that like they're new, because we've had floodgates in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. We've had Royal Oppression, we've had Benny's Emptiness. Those did both end up banned. We've had Imperial Order, and also ended up banned. So maybe, I mean, like more of these floodgates could just go that way. TC Boo or whatever, Anti-Spell Fragrance, Rivalry. Maybe they could all just end up banned. I'd like to maybe see them at 1 and just, eh. But, oh yeah, the point I was going to make was that with floodgates, they used to be kind of like seen as like cards that were used in stun decks, but nowadays it's much more often the case that they're just used in the meta decks, the combo decks themselves. You do your crazy combo, you set your floodgate, your opponent can't play. Fun, everyone's happy, right? So I think like putting them to 1 would be an interesting choice. It might turn them into the Imperial Order problem though. That's something that I sort of fear. Where like Imperial Order was at 1, but man was it oppressive. And it felt sackier because it was at 1, because it's like, wow, your opponent drew like the 1 card out of 40 of them. So I don't know, and it might actually make them more often main decked. Like if they're all at 1, then people might just be inclined to main deck, Rivalry and Gozen even more often than they already are. There can be only 1. So maybe you just ban them. That just seems a bit sudden. I mean, I don't think Konami is gonna like be banning multiple floodgates in one list, but they could perhaps put some to 1. The big offender in the room right now is Mystic Mind. It's always been on the hot seat. I think that hasn't changed a lot. It's just that it's been getting seen at more YCS events lately, like in the event coverage and on the main stage and the live streams. I think Konami probably doesn't want that to be what people are looking at, is just 2 players passing and drawing and passing and drawing. So maybe Mystic Mind finally gets the axe. But like we say that so much, and it seems like Konami doesn't ever want to hit the damn thing, so if it doesn't get hit, I can't say I'd be surprised. It just seems like Konami likes to let this card exist. I know there's the naysayers who think like, oh, well, it checks the meta, but like this card is extremely uninteractive, and I just don't like it. If they had just tied any sort of a cost to it, 500 life points per turn, so now you're getting burned out as you stall on this card, or even like banish the top 5 cards or whatever from your deck to like face down or whatever, like Golden Castle Stromberg, then you can't stall with this card. I just think they just needed an anti-stall thing. I don't mind Mystic Mind being something that you can use to like kind of halt the game for a couple turns, but I think that the way that it is now, it just drawing out games like that's not cool. If I had to pick one floodgate, that'd be the one that I would ban, and the rest of them, whatever happens, happens. So I'd like them to go to 1. I have a hard time seeing Konami hit multiple like floodgates and stuff. One more sort of floodgate related card that I hear talked about is Dimensional Barrier. So this is the card that can stop like fusions or Xyz or synchros or whatever for the turn. It's most commonly used as a counterplay to Despia. That's kind of part of the reason why Despia fell off a lot. And also Sword Soul, it can be pretty good against them. It's just a way to sort of shut out synchro summoning or shut out fusion summoning for the turn. And as I've said before, I'm not a huge fan of turn skips. So some people want this card to get limited or banned. I don't know. I don't think Konami will. It just doesn't seem like it's there. I mean, because like Despia and like Sword Soul are still they're still getting the most solid representation at these events. So I don't think that this card is really hampering their success very much. So I don't really see much reason to hit it. Okay, and the last thing is the actual Despia and Sword Soul decks. So these are in a weird spot for me because despite the fact that they are the 2 most like bread and butter textbook best decks in the format, they don't always feel like it. Like, don't get me wrong, Sword Soul is very good, Despia is very good. These decks have lots of options. They can play around lots of things. They can make really strong boards. They can grind with you. They can set, they can do the whole gauntlet, right? But the thing is, I guess I find that I don't know what I would hit in these. It's a little bit easier with branded. Like, I think branded fusion going to 1 is probably a more realistic thing. I'm not a big fan of these like fusion spells that send from deck to grave. You know, it just I know Vert got banned, but obviously that wasn't really a huge part of the actual Despia strategy. That was kind of more of a thing for other decks. I think Branded Fusion could go to 1, and that would probably be like enough of a slap on the wrist. And for Sword Soul, like, I don't know. I mean, like, it's tough with Sword Soul too, because yeah, the deck is good, but like, what do you hit? I guess you hit like Emergence, Moye. Some people have said Tingy Spirit Ashuna. It's just when they lost Arch Nemesis Protos, I think that hit made a lot more sense because that was a card that wasn't a Sword Soul card and it was like a clear turn skipper thing, right? Like it says you can't summon this attribute or whatever. Kind of an auto win button against a lot of decks. Right now, I don't know that Sword Soul really has that. So, and this is coming from somebody who doesn't play the deck. I'm not like, you know, biased towards it or anything like that. It's just that I don't think that Despia or Sword Soul are unfun to play against, whereas I think that like pile decks just spamming Scythe and like decks flipping Floodgates feels more problematic right now. And just the fact that everybody's playing the Adventure Engine, that feels like a little bit more oversaturating. But I know these decks are always in a clock, so Konami's going to find a way. Like I said, for Despia, that's probably Branded Fusion. If I had to pick something for Sword Soul, maybe it would just be Sword Soul Emergence. And like, you know, whatever. It's also weird because like we're about to get Sprites and Tiara Elements, and that feels like, you know, they're going to kind of be power creeping these two decks. So it's weird, like, you know, Sword Soul and Despia getting hit right before Sprites and Tiara Elements come out. It's like, man, you guys are really just trying to push us along into the next product. So I don't know. I'd like to see Sword Soul and Despia maybe get another format or something to hang around and like see how they fare against the, you know, incoming Sprite invasion and all that stuff. Okay, there's one last card that I kind of think maybe belongs on the list, and that's Super Polymerization. I find this card is just a little too sacky. It's very obnoxious when you're playing like Despia Dittos, but it's pretty relevant against a lot of decks in the format, and while I personally enjoy using it as a counterplay type of card myself, I just sometimes think it's kind of rude, it's kind of obnoxious, and like in Power of the Elements, we're getting that new like level 6 Dragon Fusion monster thing that can like take 2 monsters with the same attribute or something like that, same type and attribute. It's just, we just get more and more super poly targets. The card gets increasingly sackier. You can't respond to it. It's very rude. Then it's been on and off the ban list in the past. So like, I don't know. Sometimes like super poly kind of fades into the background whenever it's not really relevant in the format, particularly when there aren't like a lot of dark based decks floating around. But I don't really like the card. It's won me plenty of games, don't get me wrong. I love it when I use it, but I think it probably doesn't really need to be existing. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything that I can talk about. There are obviously, there's like the question of maybe cards coming off the list. I barely have kept up with like what's at, you know, cards that are at 2 will probably find themselves at 3, whatever they are. Banned cards that could come back. I mean, I made a video talking about how I think the Dragon Rulers could probably afford to come back, maybe one at a time. Let's start with Blaster. And yeah, you know, whatever. I don't have as much to say about that. That's all up in the air what Konami does with it. Okay, I've gone on much longer than I usually like to with these videos, but I know it's a ban list discussion, so people gotta talk, and talk we will. So let me know down in the comments what you think of what I said. Remember, be respectful. You know, these are just my opinions. They aren't anything too crazy, and Konami is not asking me for advice on ban lists. Trust me. So, all right, it's gonna be it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.